Awesome. Yeah, welcome everyone to the third Founder Talk event. This is going to be cloud computing, an introduction to cloud computing for entrepreneurs with Alexander Singh, who's the CEO and co-founder of Mist. So I'll just let Alex take it away.
All right, let me share my screen here. All right, well, are you seeing a mountain right now? All right, good. Do you see a deck now? Shred, legendary. All right. I know, I guess, all of you, but just quick background. As Alex said, my name is also Alex. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mist. I graduated UVA with a degree in biomedical engineering in 2019. While I was at UVA, I did a bunch of programs. One of them was Quake Capital, which gave me exposure to venture capital for startups. So have some background there. When I was at UVA, I also started what was formerly and kind of currently called the Ripple Fellowship for Entrepreneurial Thinking. We're going through a name change, but basically just trying to mentor young entrepreneurs. And after I graduated, while working part-time on Mist, I am an analyst for Deloitte Consulting. And it's at Deloitte Consulting where I actually got certified in AWS. And I've brought that back to Mist, where we're now currently using AWS to develop our technology. So quick background on what we do. So we're developing a computer vision algorithm that both measures and predicts scoliosis, as well as a disc replacement implant that can treat scoliosis with a significantly less invasive procedure, but the same level of correction as current technologies. Not kind of jumping into it. This is kind of a very mismatched deck, but if you'll excuse me, we'll just kind of jump onto the computing part. And if you have questions about my background, we can go more into that at the end. So physical computing, if you think about it, is typically an application is built on top of a host operating system that sits on top of that device's infrastructure. And at one point, somebody came up with virtualization. So if you've ever heard of a virtual machine, essentially it works by running on a software called a hypervisor, where you can build out multiple different operating systems and then put different applications on those operating systems. So if you have an application that needs a Linux operating system, and you also have an application that uses a Windows operating system, you can run them on the same infrastructure by using virtual machines. Whereas before, you could only run Linux apps on a Linux operating system because that you didn't have a hypervisor to split up the underlying infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mean things like the RAM, the CPUs, et cetera, the actual kind of hardware parts of your computer. So jumping from virtualization to cloud computing, cloud computing is essentially using virtualization from servers that you do not maintain yourself. So this is the general definition of cloud computing from the NIST, which is like the governing body for cloud technology. It's a bunch of words, kind of doesn't really make any sense. But basically what cloud computing is an on-demand, self-service, very elastic ability to use computing power from multiple virtual machines that you do not manage yourself. So kind of look at that more in depth. So here on the left, you see this is typically in your traditional IT infrastructure. You're managing everything. So you manage all the servers, the networking, the entire bottom-up infrastructure for your application. But on the cloud, you don't have to manage a lot of that. The cloud service provider will manage it for you. So for example, if you're using infrastructure as a service, based on its name, the cloud service provider is giving you the infrastructure and you are doing all the work on top of that. Platform as a service, the cloud service provider is giving you the infrastructure and the platform for you to run your application. And software as a service, they're basically giving you the application for you to use built on their own infrastructure. So there's multiple benefits to cloud. I stole this slide from AWS and made it look different. So don't want to get copyright infringed there. But basically, The main benefit of cloud is that you're trading all your capital expenses for variable expenses. So now instead of having to actually buy the hardware and the servers and whatnot for you to run your applications, you're just buying you're basically paying as you go for the underlying infrastructure. So if you need like some amount of CPUs for a certain amount of time, you'll pay for that, versus if you have to actually buy the hardware with that many CPUs, then you're paying for the hardware upfront, which is a pretty high CapEx cost. You also get benefits from massive economies of scale. So AWS, it's a huge company, Jeff Bezos, richest guy in the world. They have the ability to purchase a lot of servers, and because they're so wealthy, they can actually work with some of those companies that develop GPUs and CPUs and have like more cutting edge technology run on their own servers. Another huge one, especially for us at Mist, is that you don't have to guess capacity. So previously, let's say that you were trying to run an algorithm similar to ours, you'd have to guess that every month you'd have 20 users, and then you have to buy the hardware to support those 20 users. I mean, 20 users is pretty low, but just an example. Whereas in cloud computing, you can set limits so that as your number of users increases during the day or increases over the week, you can spin up more servers to meet that demand. And as it decreases, you can then shut down those servers so that you're not paying extra while there's not as many users. There's other benefits here, but I would say that those three top ones are definitely the big three. Kind of jumping into cloud service providers here. These are big three: AWS, Azure, GCP. They all provide the same thing. So it really is dependent a lot on the specific costs for each service and how comfortable you feel with the service. So for example, I really like App Engine on GCP, but I like the interface for serverless functions on AWS better. So Mist is using serverless functions, so we're using AWS right now. And then in terms of other companies leveraging cloud, the two big names that you often hear a lot about are Snapchat and Netflix. So in Snapchat's case, they built their entire application off of Google Cloud App Engine. And in Netflix case, they built their applications off of AWS. So one of the cool features of AWS and pretty much every cloud service provider is CloudFront. So you can essentially have a local cache, I guess you could think of it as. And so your content can be delivered to users around the world. And you can also have multi-regional clouds, essentially, where you're providing to users in a certain region from a data center that's closer to them. So let's say all users in the DC area can get provided to through the Northern Virginia data centers. And then all the users in China that are using Netflix, if Netflix is legal in China, I'm not sure, are getting provided through a Beijing data center. So yeah, stop me if you have any questions on that. I have an example if we want to go through it. It's very, very simple, but if you're interested, we can do it. It's your call.
So is that that's the end of the talk part? We'll go into Q&A?
I had one more part.
Okay, one more part. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was just about how we're using AWS. So a lot of I guess instead of doing the example, I'll just cover what it is. Like when you're building an application or building a website, what a lot of people do is they go and they pay for like Wix or something. And so you're paying like $200, $250 a year to have a website. And it's basically in most cases just a static website that's displaying information. Whereas if you develop the HTML yourself, you can basically store it on AWS for $1 to $2 a month, and then set up a DNS service to direct users to that static website, and you pay significantly less costs. So I know if Drew was here, he does a lot of like websites and stuff, so that would have been particularly cool for him. And then, yeah, just in terms of us using AWS, so what we're doing is we're hosting a static portion of our application in an S3 bucket on AWS. And then every time a user comes in and uploads a new X-ray image to that bucket, we have a Lambda function, which is a serverless function. And that essentially means that AWS is managing all the infrastructure for it. So something can't be serverless, but it's serverless to me because I'm not having to deal with that backend infrastructure. And so that function gets triggered every time an image is uploaded. It then runs our algorithm on that image and returns key values, which we then display on our front end. So it's a very simple, backend or integration capability through AWS for a pretty complicated algorithm that we're running, which is really nice. Yeah, that's all I've got on the presentation slides.